Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 18th ProfessionalVMware.com vBrownbag. This is the first in a series of episodes for What's New in vSphere 6. My name is Jonathan Frappier. I am your host tonight, and with us we have Mr. Nick Marshall. Nick, how's it going?
Good evening. I'm well. Just got back from the airport in time.
Excellent. Millennium Falcon or DeLorean?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Yeah, I was. How about both? One for a different day of the week.
The DeLorean brought you back, or brought you forward in time, so you could get the Millennium Falcon to make the airport run in less than 12 parsecs or something like that.
Oh, I did it in much less than 12 parsecs.
Excellent. Few show notes before we get started. Obviously, we are here on Wednesday nights for the U.S. show. 8:30 Eastern, 7:30 Central. We have our APAC shows every other Thursday, our EMEA shows on Tuesdays, 2 p.m. U.S. time, 7 for the folks over in EMEA, and they're actually going to be kicking up a VCP cloud series based on VCP 6 and vRealize automation. We have our Latin America show for our Spanish-speaking listeners on Thursday, and we are working on ramping up another OpenStack series for you as well. If you got questions, pop them in the GoToMeeting window or on Twitter. Drop the vBrownbag hashtag, and I'll see it and make sure Nick gets the question. And with that, I guess, Nick, you can kick it off.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. So, unfortunately, I don't have the Twitter stream up in front of me, so I've got it on my phone, but yeah, if you could relay questions, that'd be great.
Will do.
Hey everyone, it's actually been 18 months since I've been on a brown bag. I've kind of been busy writing another book, so I haven't been able to host as many of these as I'd like. Since I was last on here, I kind of moved to the US as well, so life's been pretty hectic, but if you don't know who I am, I work for VMware. I was working for professional services when I was in Australia. I moved over to the US about 12 months ago, and now I'm working as an integration architect internally with the engineering teams on not just vSphere, but lots of the other products. I have a blog that occasionally gets updated. I'm on the Twitters, and as I said before, I wrote a couple of books on vSphere, so hopefully I know what I'm talking about, but you would be surprised to hear how late in the game some things change. So you have to forgive me if some of the speeds and feeds, I get a little tongue-tied sometimes with the number of changes that came in at the last minute. But without further ado, let's get into it. So as Jonathan said, this is going to be a series. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to use tonight's brown bag as a bit of a high-level overview of some of the areas. I broke it into 4 areas. We'll touch briefly on vCenter architecture as well. Next week's session is going to cover that more deeply. But what I'd like is, I don't know about you guys, but I'd much prefer to play in the lab than go through PowerPoint slides. So for whoever's listening live, if you want to hit us up in the chat or throw a hashtag on Twitter, any of the stuff that I'm talking about tonight or any of the stuff that I'm not talking about, let me know, and then when we get into the lab later on, we can dive into and I can show you where things are, what they look like, what we can and can't do. I've got a GA lab ready to go. The only thing I don't have access to is virtual volumes, but it's vSAN capable, so if you want to have a play around with that, we can do that too. So let's get into it. Feeds and speeds. This is a slide that, for me, it's kind of a ho-hum. It's well, how many people out there are actually running VMs of this size? About the only one in vSphere 6 that's relevant to me is the 64 host in a cluster, that top one there. There's going to be some architectural decisions there that you're going to want to consider, especially when you're scaling out vSAN clusters, if you're into that. But the number of CPUs per host or per VM or the amount of memory, it's almost like an arms race against the other hypervisors. I'm not going to name any here since I work for VMware. I could probably get in trouble for that kind of thing, but it's a bit of an arms race. I think that it's more of a marketing numbers game than anything. But hey, if you've got monster VMs that you want to try and cram 128 virtual CPUs into, go for your life, is what I would like to say. I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about one of the, in my opinion, one of the most exciting features in the compute RAM, and that's around the instant clone or the VM fork or the Project Fargo. It's have a few different names. There is one small caveat, and I've kind of put that down there in small itty-bitty writing. This feature is currently only accessible through a private API, and everybody can have a little cry. I dare say, look, I haven't talked to the team, and I'm not privy to any information, but I'm guessing that because it's a 1.0, they want to fine-tune it and tweak it. There are going to be some use cases for Vue and for big data extensions. They're going to be making use of this private API. I dare say in a future release, hopefully, we'll see this new technology. But I want to go over a little bit of what it actually does. So if you haven't heard, VM fork or instant clone will actually allow you to spin up a clone of a powered-on VM in, well, under seconds to under seconds. Like, it's really, really fast. So what does it actually do? First, it creates some new VM files on disk, right? A new copy, a new VMX file. Then what it will do is it will hotlink clone the memory. So what it will do is it will do copy on write for the memory. And then what it will do is it will also do copy on write for the disk as well. That's great. You've effectively got here like a fault-tolerant VM. It's exactly the same, except it's doing copy on write. That's great. But then what does it do? Well, then we need to uniqueify, and that's a patent-pending term that I just coined just right now. We uniqueify the child VM. What does that mean? Well, we give it a new MAC address, a new IP address, so we can get it on the network without it being a conflict. We give it a new name so that we can resolve it with DNS. And then we do something really cool. If it's a Windows box, we can actually reset it and join it to the network without needing to reboot the guest, which I think is kind of cool. But we can do that in a very, very fast amount of time. So let me just go back a little bit. Before you actually clone it, the way that you set this up is you have like a hot running. It's like a template. But it's not it's a powered-on template, and you use that template to spin up your additional forked VMs. But it's not a VM that you'd necessarily use day to day, because obviously that's changing all the time. So it's a hot VM that's running, that's powered on, that's got everything ready to go, but it's not necessarily something that's under load. So think of it from a VDI perspective. If you've got a bunch of video desktops that you need, let's say a class logs on, you can actually, instead of provisioning a whole heap of VMs preemptively ahead of time because you know the class is about to start, because it takes a second or less, maybe a little bit more, I'm not going to talk specifically about numbers, but let's say it takes a very short amount of time to spin up a live VM ready to go. You can do it as and when needed rather than spinning up too many to begin with, or having to wait multiple seconds, minutes to get that VM up and running. So it's a very, very cool big data extensions likewise. Unfortunately, it's private API at the moment, but hopefully we'll see some use cases going forward. So let's go into a little bit of storage stuff. This is the 1.0 of virtual volumes. This is something that not just VMware, but a number of the storage vendors have been working on for years now. It's pretty much every vendor is working on it. There's not many, well, at least that I can think of off the top of my head. At this point, I don't know of any of the major players that haven't got at least some prototypes or working on it. There's a few that have got stuff out there already on day one. But what it's going to require for the other vendors out there is they'll need a VASA 2 or VASA, however you want to pronounce it, provider. That's the API endpoint. So this is the second major release of VASA. This enables the policy-based storage. Now that VASA provider can be either, you could have it as an external VM, hopefully it's a VM, and not a physical machine, or it might be a firmware upgrade in the array itself. Different vendors will do it in different ways, but either way, it's going to require an update to get that new code in there. And as I said, there's a lot of vendors that either have it out or are working on it. So what actually is a virtual volume? So I've got this is a figure that I've taken out of the book, but there's another figure that kind of explains a little bit. Let's just take it up one more layer. So if you think about a VM sitting on a data store, what does a VM actually consist of? Well, a VM's a bunch of files, right? So what we've done is we've got a bunch of these files that we want to be able to create granular level storage decisions on. So what types of files are they? Well, you've got, in this case, we've split it up into 5 different types of files. So what that means is there's 5 different types of virtual volumes. And there's config, data, memory, swap, and other. So the config virtual volume contains things like the VMX file, the log files, that kind of thing. The data vVOL, you'd probably guess this one. This is where your VMDK, your VMware disk files are located within this within this virtual volume. Then the memory vVols, they're where your snapshots are. Your swap vVols, they're where your swap files are. That one's pretty self-explanatory. And other is a specific place for VMware solutions, like the CBRC, the change block caching. This is stuff where it's kind of reserved for VMware specific solutions. And what happens is these virtual volumes, which are living in the array natively on a storage container. So a VM is not a vVol. A vVol contains one or more files that make up a VM. So it's taking the file level VM construct and making it even more granular and then abstracting it away. Because then you can put policies on these virtual volumes to say, right, well, I want to make sure that I've got a replica of this virtual volume or this virtual volume set. So the virtual volumes sit on a storage container. Now, a storage container is actually the equivalent when it's presented to vSphere as a data store. But the good thing is there's no size limit. A storage container can be whatever size you want it to be. So, so long as the array can support it, if it's thin provision, then well, that's fantastic, because you can say that the storage container is a lot bigger than what the underlying disks are, and you can manage it the same way you always have your thin provision LUNs, and add disks and storage capacity to it whenever you need. And then what happens is those storage containers are allocated storage capabilities on the array, right? So you log into the array and you create you have storage capabilities either predefined by the vendor, or you might be able to define them yourself depending on the vendor's implementation. And then what will happen is those capabilities will be exposed through the VASA provider to SPBM, the storage policy-based management. And then you can use those capabilities and create policies for your virtual machines to ensure that, okay, this VM is important. Let's make sure that the policy of this one provides a certain percentage of flash, for example. Okay, so that policy is applied to that virtual machine, and then that the array will make sure that that policy is honored on the back-end array. That's the essence of policy-based management. Rawlinson and I are going to go through virtual volumes in, I think it's 3 weeks' time. I've got all the dates at the end of this. So let's move on to virtual SAN before I get
hey, Nick,
too far into things. Yeah.
Do you know if any of the open source or free NAS solutions like FreeNAS, have they talked about, or have you heard them looking at implementing vVols?
It's going to take a while to trickle down to them. If you think about the non-enterprise based, let's say your home and small NAS providers like your Synologies and your QNAPs and those kind of guys, just to pick up VAI took them ages. So this is, and that's just an API as well, right? So this, I think, I haven't heard anything, but I'm guessing that FreeNAS, NAS for free, even the software-based solutions like, well, I shouldn't say that. From the bigger vendors, we've been working with the bigger vendors, so they're going to have it out of the gate. Whether that program and when that program gets opened up to other people, I don't think the specs are actually open, but yeah, I haven't heard anything. Does that answer your question?
Yep, cool, thanks.
No, before I move on to Virtual SAN, was there any other questions on Twitter or in the chat?
That was the Twitters.
Ah, great. All right. So moving on to Virtual SAN, if you haven't heard, Virtual SAN's kind of taken off in the last 12 months. Well, if you follow Rawlinson on Twitter, Virtual SAN's been taking off in the last 12 months, and version 2 has it's kind of got a bit more credibility now. They're claiming it as enterprise ready, so they've got some pretty nice features in here which people have been asking for, namely all flash or pure vSAN clusters. So you don't need to have a spinning disk in the disk. The disk. Sorry, I've had a mental blank in the disk group, which is good. And they've implemented a new file system. That's through the Versto acquisition that happened a few years back. So the file system has been completely replaced. When you upgrade from 5.5 to 6, if it's a vSAN cluster that you're upgrading, you can upgrade from the old file system to the new file system non-destructively. So that's pretty nice. But in terms of scale, we got 64 hosts per cluster now in our HADRS clusters. As such, vSAN also supports 64 hosts in a cluster. In terms of IOPS per host, people are interested in this. I don't know whether it's just a marketing thing, but we're saying for hybrid it's 40,000 IOPS per host for hybrid configurations, provided your back-end disks can actually push that kind of throughput, or 90,000 IOPS per host for all flash configurations. There's a limit of 200 VMs per host and a limit of 8,000 VMs per cluster, which I think is actually, that's one of my inconsistencies, because I think you can only do 6,000 VMs per cluster. I don't know. I'll have to check that one. And we can do 62 terabyte VMDKs on vSAN now as well. So we'll dive into that, and we can ask some really deep questions of Rawlinson in a few weeks' time when we dive into that one a little bit more. So let's move on to networking. Network I/O Control 3 is coming, or has been included in vSphere 6. The main benefit is the ability to set reservations and limits, limits for the per VNIC and per port group. So it's going to require a distributed switch, obviously, because network I/O control can't run on standard switches. But now what you can do is, let's say you're running a multi-tenanted environment and you've got businesses or tenants that need to have a certain guaranteed bandwidth because that's the SLA that you've sold as part of that service. Well, now you can set that reservation for them on a port group level, so you can set that across the board. Or if you're just an admin of a vSphere environment and you've got a mission critical VM, just like you'd reserve memory or you'd reserve CPU capacity, you can now do network capacity as well. So you can do that at the VMNIC level as well. So it's a pretty nifty feature, depending on the use case that you've got. But it's now we can do reservations of all of the resources. So compute, storage, and memory all have reservations now. So network I/O control, storage I/O control, and the standard reservations that vSphere's always had. Moving on in networking is the ability to have multiple TCP/IP stacks. So previously we only had the one TCP/IP stack, one default gateway. You couldn't do a lot of traffic segmentation, especially around layer 3 networks. So now what we can do is, because we've got multiple IP stacks, we can allow vMotion over layer 3. Hip hip hooray. And we can separate things like clones and templates not having to be running over the management network. So it's for those that are trying to do designs for maybe your VCDX or I'm trying to remember, what's the new one, Jonathan? The
VCIX.
Yeah, the one that was just DCD.
Yeah, the implementation expert.
Yeah, so understanding that you've got more options to route your traffic, it's not just simply a matter of setting some shares on the network I/O control. You can have a completely different routed stack is key there. And the whole fact that you can do vMotion over layer 3 we'll get to on the next slide around vMotion, but that's pretty cool as well. You could do it before if you wanted to, but it wasn't officially supported, and that's because they couldn't guarantee that it was going to be on its own IP stack with its own gateway, and you can route it properly there, but now you can, so that's supported. Moving on to vMotion, this is the biggest update to vMotion since it was introduced, in my opinion. I think that, yeah, storage vMotion was good, you kind of get around it, but now we can do compute, storage, network, and vCenter all at once. So if you've got a virtual machine running on a vCenter, you can vMotion it to vCenter on another completely different site, because you can do up to 150 milliseconds of latency. There was a lot of information saying it was 100 milliseconds, but just on release, the quality assurance guy said, no, we can support up to 150 milliseconds. You still only need 250 meg of bandwidth, so 150 milliseconds and 250 meg of bandwidth is pretty low when you're considering that you can move the state of a virtual machine. Obviously, if it's a big VM, it's going to take a little while, but hey, the fact that you can do it's pretty cool. Now, there's a caveat here. So you can do a cross vCenter vMotion provided it's on the same SSO PSC domain, which we'll talk about in a little bit, unless you're using the API. There was William Lamb from Virtually Ghetto blogged about how he worked out that you can do this via the API. So in the last one of this series, I suggest everybody that's on that call when Josh Atwell's talking about automation, ask him really nicely if he can build a script for you to do it so that you don't have to have your VMs on the same vCenter SSO domains, and that would be really cool, because that would probably annoy him that I'm dictating what he has to talk about and do on the podcast. Any questions, Jonathan?
Yeah, so since vMotion supports the higher latency and the migration over distance, will DRS support it as well?
So DRS is still constrained to a cluster. We don't have multi-cluster DRS at this point in time. I would assume, again, I don't know, that that's a feature that they want to get to, but I have no knowledge of whether if and when that's coming. So have to plead ignorance on that one. But hey, there were people doing DRS-like things before DRS was invented. They were scripting some kind of smarts around their environment when it was just purely vMotion, and they would use a third-party script or third-party or self-written script to be able to vMotion around. So there are ways that you can do it, but no built-in ways at this time.
Cool.
Alrighty, let's move on to fault tolerance. This is also one, just like vVols, this one's been in the works for a long time. If any of you guys have been covering the last few VMworlds, this has been in tech preview or at least shown off as a tech preview for a while now, and that's multi-CPU fault tolerance, SMPFT. So it's finally here. It's up to a maximum of 4 vCPUs. So the use cases are considerably greater, but you got to keep in mind that there is going to be a penalty. Like it's not one for one. It depends on the application and how much you're hammering that VM as to how much performance hit there's going to be. But the other thing that is considerable is the bandwidth. So we're recommending 10 gig. You can do it with less than that, but it's going to be detrimental to the performance of the VM that you're trying to protect. It's not going to slow down the host. It is going to saturate the link that you're running it over. We can saturate 10 gig links with a 4 vCPU or 2 4 vCPU VMs pretty easily, provided they're working really hard. So you need to check the performance characteristics of the VM you're trying to protect and the network capability that you've got, and design accordingly. In terms of use cases specifically for vCenter, yes, it is supported, but only for the tiny and small instances. So if you have a look at the deployment profiles that vCenter allows, tiny and small go up to 4 vCPU. If you want medium or large, I think, and there's an extra large as well, that's 8 or 16 vCPUs. So you're not going to be able to protect those because we can only go up to 4 vCPUs for FT. But I mean, if you think about it, I guess what it comes down to is how big is your environment, how do you want to protect vCenter, heartbeat's gone away, so maybe this is all you've got. I think the small environment can still do up to 100 hosts, if I get my numbers right. So yeah, I guess it really comes down to how big is the environment that you're trying to protect. Speaking of vCenter, that's a good segue. I want to briefly talk about vCenter. Sorry, Jonathan, were you wanting to?
Yeah, so is the math on that pretty straightforward? So if it's 8 total fault-tolerant vCPUs per host, that means I could have 8 virtual machines with 1 vCPU or 4 virtual machines with 2 vCPUs?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just
whatever combination.
Whatever combination you like, 2 4 vCPUs or whatever you like, and that's per host. So it just won't allow you to power on. I think it's a hard limit. I think they actually stop it. I haven't tested it, but I think it's a hard limit. So
okay.
vCenter architecture. So as you probably, well, hopefully aware by now, single sign-on has been moved into this new construct called the Platform Services Controller. It's we've got I've got a slide on what that is coming up after this, but in terms of vCenter databases, a lot of people have been asking for, can we do an external Microsoft SQL database from the VCSA? And the answer is no. And the reason behind that was always, well, Microsoft doesn't support their ODBC driver for Linux. It's there, but it's not officially supported. So we can't officially support a solution that, when we're relying on their database, isn't officially supported, because that gets into all kinds of support nightmares. However, there is some light at the end of the tunnel, and that is, as we'll see on a couple of slides up here, the embedded Postgres database on the VCSA supports up to the maximum, which is 1,000 hosts and 10,000 VMs. So we don't actually need external databases anymore. There's going to be some DBAs out in the world that are saying, well, I have to manage all the databases. Well, that's what the networking guy said, and that's what the storage guy said about virtualization in general. So maybe the fact that we're black boxing everything away from them is a good thing. I guess it depends who you ask, I guess. But the external SQL database and external Oracle is still supported on the Windows vCenter, and you can, if you've got the embedded database for vCenter on Windows, what it'll actually do is it'll actually export the data out of that SQL Express instance that you've got, and it will do a database dump. It'll then uninstall vCenter as part of that upgrade process, reinstall vCenter, and then re-import that data back into an embedded Postgres database. So the SQL Express on Windows is no longer an option. It doesn't come redistributed with vCenter anymore. But there's a bigger deal for vCenter, in my opinion, and that's the new web client. It's been a point of pain for many vSphere administrators over the last few iterations of being slow and unresponsive and at times unintuitive. But there's been a lot of work done internally at VMware to try and get this thing performant and logical. This screenshot was taken earlier today, so we'll jump in this exact lab later on. How am I going for time? Soon. I'll get to it very soon. And right-click menus are very flat and a lot closer to, almost identical to the old desktop client, so that would be better. All right, let's move on to the platform services controller.
Hey Nick, question back on the fault tolerant stuff. Since 10 gig is recommended, is it recommended to have a dedicated 10 gig link, or can that coexist with vMotion or management or?
Yeah, well, I guess what it comes down to is how important is the machine that you're trying to protect. Is it worth not slowing that machine down? See, it'll work with less than 10 gig. So let's say let's take the hypothetical of, okay, I'm going to share it with my vMotion network, and all of a sudden DRS kicks in because the clusters become unbalanced, or you've got a I don't know, a maintenance window, and you need to patch some hosts and something goes into maintenance mode. Then what's going to happen is a heap of vMotions are going to kick off, and while the fault-tolerant VM will be there and it'll chug along, the performance of that VM is going to suffer because the network bandwidth isn't there. So, hey, if it's important enough to protect with fault tolerance, then it's probably important enough to give as much bandwidth as possible. But then the other thing that you can do is you can make sure with network I/O control that the fault tolerance traffic has a reserved amount. I would much prefer my my fault tolerant machine to not slow down and my vMotions take a little bit longer than my fault tolerant VM to slow down. It's a way to design around it. In terms of how much bandwidth does it actually take, well, if 8 fault-tolerant vCPUs at 100% is going to flood 10 gig, okay, you can effectively say, and I haven't checked this, maybe send an email to Mark Timachuk and ask him if he has the numbers or if he could do the numbers, if you're really interested in this. I think it's Mark, is it Mark A on Twitter? I can't remember. Mark Timachuk, he's the performance guy anyway. Ask him. Say, is one of the new fault-tolerant vCPUs, which is this is fast checkpointing. This is a different technology than what was used before. So it's effectively a heavily modified version of cross vMotion. And what it does is it just doesn't finish, and it just continually executes multiple times every second. That's kind of how it works. But you could just say to him, hey, if I'm looking at this and you're recommending 10 gig and you're recommending a maximum of 8 fault-tolerant vCPUs per host, well, I don't know. I'm speaking from assumption here, but would that mean that it takes about 100 meg of bandwidth per vCPU? Probably. So you could do some generalization there, but then it's also going to depend on, well, how much are you hammering this CPU? If it's an important VM, like really critical, but not used very much, it's not a CPU heavy VM, then you might be able to get away with it. But it's just I would test it and check. That's the only way around it. When it's that important, you want to bring it up in a lab and test it.
And it looks like that was another config maximum bump too. You can support 16 10 gig ports now on a single host. Looks like it's up from 8 on 5.5.
Yeah, I don't know whether that was in or out. If that's what you've seen, then that's probably right. The config, is the config maximum stock out yet?
Yeah, it is. I'll tweet it out too. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, if you could tweet that out, that'd be great. Let me go back to the PSC. So as I was saying, SSO is part of this platform services controller. The PSC holds other stuff other than just SSO. It's licensing, so it shares licensing information across the domain. It's a certificate authority, so this is where VMware's realized that the certificate management issuing and reissuing and expired certs are a real pain in the backside. So now we are a CA for our own certs, and we can manage them from this appliance. It's permissions across the entire domain as well, policies and tags too. So if you think about it, we can now vMotion machines between anywhere that exists with layer 3 connectivity that is managed by a joined PSC, or joined single sign-on. So we've effectively taken the boundary a couple of steps further. It's not just within the data center. It's we can really vMotion a machine throughout our entire environment. And that's going to pave the way for all the other things as well. So if you think about vRealize Ops, well, that's going to integrate with the Platform Services Controller. If it doesn't already, it will at some point. The same with VRA and I'm guessing SRM and all the other products. So the whole idea is that this is going to be that, think of the inventory service, and it's got a service registry within it so that everybody knows what products are registered and all the metadata about everything else. That's the idea behind it. But hey, there's a whole session on this next week, so I don't want to dive too deep into it. But this is great because it means that linked mode actually works between Linux and Windows, or Linux to Linux, or obviously Windows to Windows, because the linked mode happens all through the PSC, not through vCenter. So, hey, if it was up to me, we'd get rid of the Windows appliance, the Windows version of vCenter, because the Linux appliance does everything we need now. Hey, I'm taking off my VMware hat here. That's just my personal opinion. But there's plenty of customers out there with Windows. There's plenty of customers that use the Linux appliance. But there is this cool thing, I think it's very, very cool, that just got announced, I think it was last week or the week before, the Windows to Linux converter. So it's a fling. So we're still trying to get this officially supported by VMware support. William and I are kind of championing this internally to say, hey, this should be supported, and we're working on it. I think we will get it supported. Stuff that comes as a fling is usually not supported, but we're saying this one is so important that we should get it supported officially. So, hey, once the VCSA is up and running and managing your environment, why is it any different? That's our argument. But hopefully we'll get them to see the light, but no promises, of course. And yeah, we've got feature parity now, so we can support maximum of 1,000 hosts and 10,000 VMs on Linux or Windows. Cluster size the same. Linked mode works. The only thing you really need Windows for is VUM now, really. So, any questions before I move on?
So far, so good.
So far, so good. All right.
Or I'll throw one out at you, actually.
I want to jump in the lab. Oh, sure. Go for it.
So when, I'm sure the answer is that you are not sure and or can't say anything, but when I saw some of the VROP stuff, the way it kind of scaled out just by adding additional nodes in and having it cluster and share data on the back end, it seems similar to how the PSC does it. Are we going to see that in the Linux vCenter appliance ever for easier scale out?
Hey, never say never. That's not the way this works. It's fairly easy to deploy it. So I don't have it in this deck, but installing the PSC or vCenter uses the exact same installer, the exact same binary, so it's not like you have to deploy something different or run something different. It just spawns a different installer, whether it's on Windows or whether it's the Linux appliance. And you run through and you say, hey, I want a PSC platform services controller and I want a new one, or I want to join an existing one. You put in the credentials and then you give it an IP address and a name and that kind of just the, standard OVF deployment kind of stuff, a few extra things to join it to the existing, and there you go. The good thing is that you don't have to worry about replication, and you don't have to worry about what happens if I want to have multiple PSCs, which one's the master, which one's the slave. You can set these up as a load balance pair behind like an F5 or an NSX load balancer, whatever you want to do. But in terms of the niceties that VROps has got in terms of their scale-out stuff, they spent, I think it was, I don't know how long it was between the 5.8 release when they started working on 6.0. It was a while to get that cool, nice technology in there, and I'll admit it, it's good. It's good.
How about backups on the appliance right now? Is that still from a database backup perspective? Is there anything exposed so that I can have that dump locally, or do I still need to SSH into that? And
I guess it depends what you want to do. I mean, if you want to just get the database out, it's the same. The good thing is, with VMware Tools in 6.0, we can now quiesce Linux file systems. So if you want to use something with VADP based backup, where it'll actually call a quiesce file system, then take a snap, and then back it up, then it actually will do that on Linux as well as Windows now. So that might help in terms of getting a recoverable Linux VCSA. But in terms of exposing an API to dump a file, or being able to put it into like a maintenance mode and getting an export, not at this stage.
Cool.
All right, in terms of upgrading, I got lots of questions about this at VMUG the other day, so I just wanted to put this in here as well. If you want to do an upgrade, this chart here is taken. I've taken kind of the main products out of it. The chart on the KB article is a lot bigger. It's like, I don't know, 30 columns or something ridiculous. But I took the main ones and just kind of distilled it down to say, hey, if you've got an external SSO, do that first. If you've got vCloud Director, do that next. VCNS or NSX, then you do vCenter. Then you've got a few options. Then you can do your VROps, your replicator, your VUM, your orchestrator, or whatever you want. SRM's next. Then finally your hosts, then your tools, and your edges and firewalls. So that's the kind of order of operations. Some people get confused about when they should do certain things. But the way that I like to think about it is what's at the top of the stack, do that first. Because generally things will support older versions of what's underneath it, but not newer versions of what's on top of it. Is that the right way around? Something like that anyway.
I follow the logic. That doesn't necessarily mean anything.
So think of your infrastructure like a stack. Your SSO sits at the top, or your vCloud Director sits on top of that. And vCenter sits on top of your hosts, so you do vCenter before you do your hosts. Just think of it in terms of a hierarchy like that. But this KB talks about everything under the sun. It's good KB. I like this one. This is my second favorite. My most favorite KB article, and this is, yeah, I'm a real VMware nerd. My most favorite KB article is actually the one that lists every single port that you need for every single product. That's my most referred to.
Except it just misses the application services and vRealize automation ports. Not that I've been looking at it recently.
Well, you need to send me an email and I'll get it updated for you.
Excellent. You will have one tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I will talk to the guys that do our KB articles. All right, so we've got, oh geez, only 10 minutes. That's not enough time.
We have all the time you have, sir.
All righty. All right. So questions and feedback, there's my email address. Use it or abuse it, I don't care. I have spam filters, go nuts. Shameless plug, buy my new book. in terms of the next few weeks and what's available, I thought I fixed the professional VMware site, but it looks like it's reverted back, so I don't know what's going on with that. But in terms of dates and presenters and topics, there's a table. So next week, Imad's going to be talking about specifically the Linux appliance of vCenter and the PSC. Did I keep saying PSA?
I think you said PSC. I heard PSC every time. PSC.
Oh, good. Okay. I don't want to call our new appliance the public service announcement.
Again, me following your logic doesn't necessarily mean it was right, because I tend to check out after the first letter of a word.
Yeah. All right. Fair enough. GS and I will be back on April Fool's Day to talk about fault tolerance. So we'll dive into how fault tolerance, how that fast checkpointing works. We'll talk about the long distance vMotion, HA and DRS changes, that kind of stuff. Then the week after that, Rawlinson and I will be talking about virtual volumes a little bit more. Following that, we'll talk about vSAN. And then I think Mike's coming in after that to talk about security. So he'll probably dive into, I'm guessing, the PSC and how the certificate management stuff works and how the authentication works. And then finally, Josh, who was with the co-author on my book, thanks again, Josh, is going to come in and talk about automation and probably all other things Ginger. So let me just kill this presentation. Was there any questions before I get into the lab?
Yeah, there is one. Can power CLI commands be run against the appliance? So vCenter power CLI things.
Yep, you can't run them from the appliance because obviously power CLI needs Windows. But yeah, you can run it. I mean that works today. If you've got a Linux-based virtual appliance running your vCenter 5.5, you can still run power CLI commands around it. That's not a problem at all. All right. Let me just log into this lab here. So what does everybody want to see? There's 25 of you online. I want to know what you want to see because I can show you whatever you like.
I'd not turn down vSAN 6 things if everyone else is being quiet. Graham says everything.
All the things.
All the things. Demo all the things. I got to go find that meme now.
Josh should already have it on Twitter as soon as I said it.
Yeah, but no one would have heard you for the entire episode either.
Oh, ouch. Oh, that's harsh. True, but harsh. All right, can everybody see the web client?
Yeah, it's loading.
Awesome. All right. All right, so here we are. So this is, I'm running this over VPN, so it might be a little chuggy. This is a management cluster that was built not too long ago. It's physical kit, so it's not nested, it's the real deal. One of the things that I pointed out around vSAN was, on the vSAN slides, was being able to, as you know, for disk groups within vSAN, you need to have one flash disk. If you're doing a hybrid, now you can do it with all flash, but you need flash disks. And sometimes, if you're in a home lab and you don't have any flash, you want to be able to mark disks as flash, or the other way around if you wanted to. And this is what I think. Who was that at VMworld last year? They did a pure flash version of vSAN by marking some of their flash disks as spinning disks. But now there's actually a way to go in and do that. Whereas before, you'd have to go in and run some commands, some ESX CLI, what was it, some disk claim rules, and actually mark the disk as the disk type was flash. But now what you can do is you can actually go in here, and you can actually say, hey, I want to mark this as SSD, HD, or I want to mark that as flash. So you don't actually have to go into the CLI now to do it. You can just go in there. That's great for home lab. That's in my opinion, that was one of the things that I got the most excited about. The other thing that's supported now, which is kind of cool, is turning the LEDs on the disks. So if you're trying to work out, sometimes the disks that are the order that they're presented to or that they're mounted in isn't necessarily the order that they are in the array or in the tray that you've got them in, so you can flash the LEDs there. One of the things we didn't go over in terms of vSAN was the whole idea of fault domains. So now when you're doing your storage profiles and you're setting up faults to tolerate, you can say, okay, well, or when you're setting up, I need this many replicas, you can set it up so that it's a fault domain. It could be a bunch of servers, or it could be a rack, which is pretty typical, or a pod, depending on your DC architecture. You can set up this idea of fault domains. And then a failure within a single fault domain is treated as one failure. Oh yeah, as it says up the top there. So what did you want to see within vSAN? There's not much to see. It's presented as a data store.
Pretty straightforward. No, I mean that was the being able to mark the disk is certainly a nice feature to have exposed now.
Yeah, the other one that I didn't mention was marking them local. So sometimes, depending on the array type, it'll show them as remote disks, and you want them to be local because vSAN won't actually pick them up and allow you to claim them if they're remote. So you can do that in here now as well. I'm not going to show you my vSAN licensing this time. The last vBrownbag that I hosted, I clicked on this tab down here and had to edit things out, so I'm not going to do that today.
Any new nifty features in the web client?
Yeah, I think some of the things that you probably won't see so much is that you can see that there's these little pins here. So if you click the pin, you can say, oh, okay, the recent tasks are down here now, or you can pin them over to the side if they're on the side. So you can have kind of full screen there. Or you can do really, come back, you can do some really weird stuff, like you can actually drag and drop the panes. So I want, and you can see that I'm dragging this here, and you can say, well, what do all those icons mean? Well, down here kind of pins it to there where you'd expect. This one kind of drags it over to like a half. This one is that top section, and this one that section. But then on the inside of these, you also get these four little ones. So you can drag stuff to there. And now I can have a longer navigator there. Or I want my alarms to be within, this is going to be really weird, like that. You can stack stuff around. It's a lot more malleable, for lack of a better word. And if you stuff it up like that, or you make something like really, really tiny, you can always go up here, and then you can, it's under here, sorry. You can say layout settings, and then you can say reset to default layout, because you can do some really weird stuff. You can make some of those panes tiny, because you can just make squares in, squares in, squares in, squares, and then it just sets it back to the factory default. The other thing that you might notice down here is recent tasks. One of the biggest complaints was the fact that you couldn't see all users' tasks within the web client. If you click this, much to the annoyance, it actually says, oh, well, you can't do that, it's disabled. You have to go in and do some modification of some files to enable that. Why it's just not a tick box here, I have already complained and filed a bug, but hopefully that gets put in update 1 or something like that. But just look for enable all users vSphere 6, and you'll find there's a blog on blogs.vmware.com or a KB article or something that'll enable that. But yeah, that's really handy, being able to see all users' tasks. So if you've got like services running in the background and you want to know what they're modifying, so let's say NSX is creating some logical routers or something, hey, I want to be able to see that. Just because I'm not creating them, because I'm not the service account that NSX is using, I still want to be able to see those tasks without having to go into monitor and then wait for it and then go into all tasks. Yeah. So yeah, I want to be able to see all of those.
SSO question, can I point a 5.5 vCenter to the 6.0 platform services controller?
Yes, you sure can. So if you have a look back on my presentation, the external SSO was the first thing that you want to upgrade. So if I jump
right, so that would make sense, and your vCenter would still be
because that's
5.5 at that point.
That's at the top of the external SSO. The vCenter is dependent on that, so you do that first. And that was the same for vSphere 5.5. So if you had a vSphere 5.1 vCenter, you could install an SSO from 5.5 and then point vCenter 5.1 at that SSO. You've got to be able to upgrade it somehow, so you've got to have an order. Window, that one back up. Still got people in the room. What else would you like to see? There's some stuff within.
One of the questions was around. I'll read it verbatim. I can't reword it on the fly. I've heard there is more details on past events and tasks. Can we see the actual action taken, like adding RAM to a VM or?
Oh, that's it. I haven't heard that one. Let's try it. All right. So let's just go into. Oh, that's test VC. Let's go in here and. So let me just show you this right-click menu or the actions menu looks a whole lot closer to what you'd expect within the desktop client. The other menu that has been added is this little one up here, which is just a mouse over. So mouse over on, mouse over off, and that gets you kind of that main vCenter menu, which is kind of handy. You don't have to go home and then back there. So we just go over here and edit the settings. And let's just change the RAM of this. I don't know. Let's just bump the memory down. So it still says reconfiguring. So if we want to monitor the tasks, what does it actually say? No. Doesn't look like it. That would be cool though. I like that idea. You missed the shortcut. So I'm just looking. There's a couple on here. You missed the shortcuts from the C# client. Are you talking about the keyboard shortcuts, George?
Yeah, it looks like it. Control Shift H.
Yeah, there's a KB about that. There is I don't remember what the keyboards are. Let me just find it. Web client keyboard. Yeah, ever valuable William has got one. Yeah, let me I'll stick that in chat, and I will post it on the Twitters as well. Now that is not vSphere 6 specific. They may have added some. But so if you want to go Control-Alt-1, Control-Alt-2, 3, 4, they go to kind of vCenter, hosting clusters, VMs and templates, that kind of thing.
Another question that came up on Twitter is, do you think that the improvements in the web client will lead to higher adoption this time through?
Yeah, I do. I do. In fact, You can imagine that although you probably don't hear a lot externally, VMware are listening to this. I would love to be able to talk a little bit more about it, and you can understand that I can't, but just me personally in the lab, I'm enjoying it a lot more using the web client. It's faster. This doesn't really show it necessarily because I'm in a lab over a VPN. It's not fantastic, but I mean it is fairly snappy just being able to move this stuff around. I don't know if it's coming through on the GoToMeeting as well as what it's on mine, but hey, it's reasonable. Now, one thing that I will also mention is that the desktop client actually has some added functionality as well. Even though it says, hey, we haven't got added functionality, you can now at least right-click on a VM. Even if it's hardware version 11, you can right-click on it and you can edit. Let's say you want to like mount an ISO, or you want to go in there and change the memory or the vCPU. Now, will you be able to go in there and add 128 vCPUs? Well, no, because that's a vSphere 6 feature, so they're going to force you to go and use the web client for that. Can you copy and paste in and out of the remote console using the web client? I think, let me just answer that in a second, Ken. So I think that the desktop client has got better in a way as well, because that's handy. You still need that to do direct-to-host config. So if you don't have vCenter, you still need the desktop client. You also still need the desktop client for VUM. You can't remediate hosts through the web client still. So VUM is effectively exactly the same in this version as it is for 5.5. That hasn't changed. So there are still uses for the desktop client, but I think that the perception of the web client, hopefully it's not like an Internet Explorer and that it has to get killed and replaced before anybody will actually kind of accept a new GUI. Hopefully it isn't that tarnished, but I think that this is a good step in the right direction. It's faster, it's more intuitive. Haters gonna hate though.
I mean, I'll stick up for it too, even from a 5.5 perspective. The last company I was at, we were very heavy Mac user base in Linux shop, so most of our folks were more comfortable with Linux than Windows, and you know, we got the web client working. I mean, real well, to the point where I don't really remember how to use the C# client anymore. I've got to you know, really electrocute the brain cells to remember where something is in the Windows client now. So if you are having trouble with the web client, my personal advice would be to take a look at your configuration, your settings, even things like clearing local flash cache and things like that. Not vSphere, flash cache. Because it worked really well for me for a long time, and it converted me in 5.5. So if it's gotten better in 6, it's solid.
If you have to use it, you will get used to it. One of the things that I think stopped adoption or slowed adoption, the other thing was the plugins. So a lot of vendors took a while to update their plugins for the web client. Some still haven't. And that's a bit sad, because it means that you can't get all of the goodness in one place. But hey, you can't force people to rewrite stuff. That's just the way it is. But let me just say this. I can't say anything, but we're not stopping. That's all I'll say about it. There was one other question. Can you copy and paste out of the remote console? So there is a new remote console utility. I don't think it's installed on this one, which is the VMRC client, which integrates with the web client. You don't actually need the web client to be able to use VMRC. So, and the good thing is you're going to get macOS and Linux versions of it. This should be able to get you copy and paste to, I think it was Ken that was asking that. Sean, I can't comment on stuff that was in the beta. If it's not GA, I can't talk about it, sorry. I'm not going to download that now. Any other questions before I call this one?
It looks like it for now.
Cool. All right. We'll store them up because I mean we're going to be doing this session for this series, I should say, for a little while. I'll just put the let me quit this and let me put this back up just so people can see it one last time. Where are we? So store up your questions for the relevant sessions if you're more interested in storage, or if you're more interested in the VCSA, then that's next week. Mark the dates, make sure you're registered, or the guys that are already live now have already registered, but if you're listening to the recording, then make sure you register and come and chat to us. I'd be more than happy to have people ask some questions on email or in person or whatever. My email address is there, so feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. I'm glad you made it back from the airport tonight.
Yeah. Thank
Awesome
you to my son sleeping in the seat next behind me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to use the transit lane, and I would not have got back here.
Excellent. All right, folks. Thanks, everyone, for coming tonight. Have a good night.
Thanks, all.